The Founding Fathers, American Revolution, our Constitution, our history, America. Thanks so much for tuning in as we discuss the people, places, events, and battles that turned 13 separate colonies into the greatest nation on earth, the United States.
Welcome back, Patriots. I'm your host, Ron Kern, and I am honored to share my passion for the American Revolution and our nation's history with you. And as a veteran and a descendant of a American Revolutionary War person named Peter Kern, I offer a unique perspective on the heroes who shaped our nation's history. And in each episode, we delve into pivotal events, people, battles, in chronological order, complemented by bonus episodes that uncover lesser known or stories or people that really nobody ever talks about that they should. So I include those as well. And I appreciate you joining me on this journey through our nation's history. I want to remind you that the Patriot Power Podcast direct line is open for you, and you can call or text to me. It's easy to remember. It's 413-FREEDOM. I'd love to hear from you. And again, that phone number is also on the bottom of the website, patriotpowerpodcast.com. Regarding podcasts, did you know that 90% of podcasts don't release more than 3 episodes? And among the remaining podcasts, 56% have 10 episodes or fewer, and only 17% have 50 episodes or more. Lastly, the average podcast lasts just 174 days, which is about 6 months, before they're either shut down or they don't have any new episodes posted. Why am I sharing that with you other than it's kind of mind-boggling? But today's pretty cool because it is my show's 51st episode. Hey, we finally broke the 50 mark, which is kind of cool. And I could not believe, I looked back, and this podcast was started February 18th in 2021. So we're coming up on 4 years. So because of you, we have shattered the statistics and odds of podcast longevity. And I can't remember, I don't believe I've given you the 2024 stats like I usually do at the beginning of every year. But in case I did, I better double check. But if I didn't, I'll add them to the next show. But I do know that we're listened to in over 42 countries, and subscribers have increased by almost 400%. So that is amazing to me. I'm truly honored to have such a wide-reaching audience, and I have to give, and I'm eager to give, the kudos and words of thanks to you, because without you, it just doesn't happen. And with that, I have a question that I need your help to come up with an answer. As you have probably listened to, I have been sharing our short video series, which is Freedom Files, Hidden Heroes, and Founding Voices, as podcast episodes. Now, these series are also available on YouTube, my social media, and I also put them on our website. But I'm considering whether to continue including them in the podcast or just have this podcast focus solely on a chronological timeline along with the bonus episodes. These short video series have been really actually well received, but I want to ensure that they are aligning with the podcast flow. And your feedback is crucial. So if you wouldn't mind, let me know if you would prefer to keep these short series in the podcast like I have been, or if you'd rather they remain on YouTube and social media and my website. You can again reach me by text at our direct line, email me at patriotpowerpodcast@gmail.com, or if you're listening on Spotify, I have put a poll, so it takes you all of 3 seconds to look at the poll and answer. And your input, what you guys tell me, is going to guide the direction of this podcast. So I hope that you will take just a couple moments and let me know. All right, another quick update on the podcast. For the first 50 episodes, I spent a tremendous amount of time preparing show notes, linking videos and photos and book reviews on the website for every single episode. So if you have listened to an episode and you want more, certainly go back to those show notes because it's all there. However, I did review some website traffic, and sadly I found that not very many people are actually visiting those show note pages. There are some, don't get me wrong, but it's just not enough for the amount of time, energy, and effort that it takes to put those there. I do that so people have extra resources, and it's just not gaining traction. So I'm going to now include all show notes and relevant links by episode and put that in the episode description that is going to be on every podcast platform. So I can't add photos to that. However, I can add links to videos and links to websites that I feel are relevant for that podcast topic, and all of which is going to be neatly organized for you. So that change is starting today. So be sure to check the episode description for links to learn more about today's topic. I think it'll make it nicer because it's all right there and you don't have to go, somewhere else to get any information. It's just all right there. So if you find a topic or an episode that you really like, just scroll down in the notes and there's going to be more information right there for you. Okay, so the last update, I promise, is soon on my website, patriotpowerpodcast.com, you will see a new page called Revolutionary Rhythms. And it's a collection of songs that I've created and hope that you find them inspiring and enjoyable and hopefully easy on the ears. These songs are about founding fathers, patriotism, battles, and anything else that relates to our country's founding and or the American Revolution. And if you want a song about George Washington, is there one? Where would you find a song about George Washington or any other person? Well, I can tell you, you're going to be able to find it on this page. I've actually completed several tracks, and one is about George Washington. Whew, I really like it. So I hope that you do. So look for this new page. It's going to be on the website. I should have that up and ready in the next week or so. And if you have not visited my website, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding, but take a gander at it. I think you're really going to enjoy it. All right, the last couple of timeline episodes were episode 37, where we covered the Henry Knox expedition, the siege, and then the evacuation of Boston. Shortly after this expedition, Thomas Paine published Common Sense, which was covered in great detail in episode 46. So today's episode, we are going to continue from that date and cover a battle that took place on February 14th, 1776. And I'm guessing you probably haven't heard about it. Maybe you have, but it's certainly not talked about very much in history books at all. So Governor Josiah Martin had a call to arms. And as the war heated up in the northern colonies, British Royal Governor Josiah Martin, he was rather desperate. He was working to get control of North Carolina from his exile aboard a British ship off the coast. Now, Martin had fled the colony in mid-1775 after tensions with the rebellious provincial Congress escalated beyond his own control. But he was not going to give up, quite the opposite. He'd been in secret communication with loyalist factions, particularly among the Scottish Highlanders who had settled in that area. Now, these Scots, many of whom had been Jacobites in the failed 1745 uprising against England, had been granted land in the Carolinas by the Crown as a sort of forgive and forget type policy, and it was a way to pacify them after their defeat at Culloden. Now, ironically, they were now being called upon to fight for the same British king that they once fought against. How is that for irony? So on February 14, 1776, he issued a formal call to arms for all loyalists across the colony. He had already convinced General Henry Clinton, who was still preparing a full-scale British invasion of the southern colonies, that if he could just organize enough loyalist militia, North Carolina could be restored to British control before major reinforcements even arrived. That was his thought process. It was pretty ambitious, and actually, if you look at it from a distance, it was pretty desperate. But he did believe that thousands and thousands of loyalists would rally to the cause, especially the Scottish Highlanders, whom he saw as fierce warriors who were eager and ready to defend the crown. However, there in fact was a problem, because the way he went about recruitment was very chaotic. Many of the Loyalists were reluctant to risk their lives so soon after the failed regulator movement, a previous conflict in North Carolina that had seen brutal crackdowns by British forces. Still, with the promise of land grants and King George III's personal support, he was able to get a force of nearly 1,600 Loyalists, most of them were the Scots, assembled under the command of Donald MacDonald and Donald MacLeod. Wow, say those names fast. Their goal was simple. We're going to march everybody to the coast and link up with the British regulars arriving by sea. And if this was successful, this could establish a very powerful Loyalist foothold in the South. And again, I'm sure you already know, but a Loyalist is somebody who sides with Great Britain and the king. The Patriots, however, had spies everywhere. As soon as Martin's orders went out, Patriot leaders such as James Monroe, Richard Caswell, and Alexander Lillington scrambled to intercept the Loyalists before they could actually make it to the British ships waiting off the coast. And what ensued was a pretty dramatic race through the swamps and pine forest of North Carolina that would culminate at Moore's Creek Bridge. And as you can guess, when two sides collide, it likely means there's going to be a battle, and that is exactly what happened. On February 27th in 1776, the Battle of Moore's Creek Bridge started in the very early hours. Have you ever heard of that battle? The Battle of Moore's Creek Bridge? Well, you're about to if you haven't. The Highlander-led Loyalist force found itself at Moore's Creek Bridge, about 18 miles north of Wilmington, North Carolina. Their ultimate destination was to get to the coast so that they could get more supplies and get reinforced because there were a lot of British ships that were just anchored there. However, unbeknownst to them, Patriot forces had already taken control of the bridge the night before. This very strategic positioning at Moore's Creek Bridge was not the only route that the British could have taken to get to the coast, but it was a significant and by far the fastest and most direct path. And as you know, marching through forests and creeks and trees and no roads, you want to take the path of least resistance and you want to get there in the shortest possible time. So this was the most direct path to get to the coast, was just go over this bridge. It sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? The Patriots, commanded by Colonel Richard Caswell and Colonel Alexander Lillington, had carefully removed many of the planks from the bridge and greased the remaining beams with animal fat. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was pig lard, ensuring that any attackers attempting a charge would have a difficult time and struggle to maintain their footing. And what was on the other side? The Patriots had already set up cannon and muskets, positioning themselves for maximum firepower. And those two guys, those two who created that on the bridge, and then the positioning and closeness and proximity of the cannons, genius. And you'll find out here why. The Loyalists, many of whom were armed only with broadswords and outdated flintlocks, had no idea what they were walking into. For those of you who can't picture what a broadsword is, in the context of the American Revolution, broadsword was sometimes referred to as a basket-hilted sword, which is a type of sword with a protective basket-shaped guard around the hand. And these swords were very popular among the Scottish Highlanders and were known for their distinctive appearance and effectiveness in combat. So if you can picture a 30 to 40 inch sword that a knight of the late medieval or the early Renaissance period carried, that's exactly what it looks like. So they didn't have all these great muskets and guns, and they came with swords and outdated flintlocks. It seems kind of an odd deal. I should have maybe looked into why they only did that. Probably, I'm guessing, they were overly cocky and arrogant, and they didn't think the Patriots had any skill or bravery, and they always thought that. They thought that throughout the entire war. But the British still believed that they had the element of surprise. So at dawn, Captain John Campbell led a vanguard of Scots across the bridge in full Highland charge. It was a battlefield tactic dating back centuries. So picture this. They're dressed in kilts, tartans, and bonnets, and they rushed forward with their broadswords raised, shouting Gaelic battle cries, expecting to overwhelm the Patriot defenses with their sheer aggression and loud yelling. The British kind of always felt that they were better than the Patriots, and if nothing else, yelling and screaming would scare them off, because after all, right, the Patriots are a bunch of wimps. The attitude of the British had this, we are better than you are kind of mentality. It continues, like I said, throughout the entire war, and you would think they would have learned, but they didn't, and it was probably not a good motto to stick with, but they did. So instead of coming on the bridge and clashing steel on steel, they were met with a devastating musket volley and a lot of cannon fire. The first wave of attackers were completely obliterated before even reaching the other side. Captain Campbell was shot dead almost instantly, and those behind him slipped and fell on the grease beams, making easy targets for the American militia. Do any of you want to take a wild guess on just how long this battle actually lasted?
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
¿Dónde están los $5 millones que me robaste?
Gloria tendrá que encontrar el dinero. Su vida y la de su hijo dependen de ello.
Hay que acorralar a la viuda.
¡Tengo mucho miedo, mamá!
El peor de los caminos será el único posible.
A mí no me importa ir a la cárcel con tal de salvar a mi hijo.
En la nueva superserie de Telemundo.
Esta mujer es clave. Que empiece la cacería.
La Jefa. Lunes a viernes a las 10:09 Centro por Telemundo.
Okay, get this. The battle lasted barely 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 90 seconds, if you can believe that or not, before the Loyalist force collapsed in total panic. This bridge, which again was located near Wilmington in present-day Pender County, North Carolina, was approximately 30 to 40 feet long and 10 to 12 feet wide. The original bridge obviously was made out of wood, and those only lasted about 10 years typically. But why they were so wide, they wanted to ensure that carts, horses, and groups of men could cross faster. So the first wave being decimated before getting halfway across demonstrates just how prepared and accurate the Patriots were. It's pretty impressive if you can picture the scene I just described in your mind. So as the sun rose over the battlefield, the Patriots captured nearly 850 Loyalists, including their leaders, Donald MacDonald and Donald McLeod. And in addition, the Americans seized 1,500 muskets, broadswords, and 15,000 pounds silver in British currency, a huge windfall for the fledgling rebellion, because this was a lot of money, and money that the British had just lost, money that the British could not use. And as we all know all too well, war is expensive. So this battle was a huge win for the Patriots, and likely many of you have not heard about it. It didn't have any very well-known generals, and the fact that the entire battle was 3 minutes long are probably some of the reasons that it's not talked about a lot or glossed over for most people who cover the American Revolution. But however, I wanted to devote an episode to it because it was truly a victory in more ways than one. One, it was a morale booster, but more importantly, it also proved that the Patriots, although maybe not conventional, could actually win battles and beat the British Army. Moores Creek Bridge is one of the most underrated turning points of the war, in my opinion, because had the Loyalists successfully reached the British fleet, North Carolina likely would have fallen under British control early on, and that would have altered the course of the Southern campaign. Instead, the defeat at Moores Creek demoralized Loyalists in the region, proving that Patriots had, in fact, the upper hand. And this victory also strengthened support for independence in North Carolina because just 2 months later, the colony would issue the Halifax Resolves, which was the first official call for total separation from Britain. And I will be covering this in detail, of course, in a not too far off future episode. So in the grand scope of war, this very small battle showed that well-organized militia, strategic positioning, and even a little grease could turn the tide against far superior numbers and experience. I like to think of it as more of a David versus Goliath moment that set the stage for the larger Southern campaigns to come. And when I cover a topic, there's nothing more exciting and hopefully beneficial to you than having first-hand accounts and descriptions from those who were either there or participated in it. And after digging through some archives, I found some old letters and other correspondence that are first-hand accounts that kind of stood out to me. I'm a history nerd, and I get excited when I find stuff like this, but I think you too will enjoy the insight that these people provide. Colonel James Moore, who was a patriot, wrote in a letter to the Provincial Congress, "The battle lasted 3 minutes." Now, there were other accounts like this, so that's how we all know that it only lasted 3 minutes. There was one guy that said it lasted 5, but the majority was 3 minutes, and I'm guessing people probably weren't sitting there with a stopwatch, but nonetheless, 3 minutes is probably the most accurate. Captain Robert Campbell, who was a loyalist on the losing side, he was describing a group of warriors. He said, "Imagine to yourself 60 able warriors walking abreast, some with spears fantastically ornamented with scarlet cloth and the feathers of the war eagle." That's very descriptive and quite impressive, but he kind of left out the fact that they all were decimated and beaten rather handily in 90 seconds. Governor Josiah Martin, he also was a loyalist. He wrote a report to British officials, and he said, "The defeat of the Loyalists at Moore's Creek has been a fatal blow to His Majesty's affair in this province." Now, this next quote is from Colonel Richard Caswell, who was a patriot, and it's kind of lengthy, but it really is important because he paints a very detailed picture of this battle. So I'm going to read this to you, what he said, and just try to picture it in your mind because he was there. That's the cool part, right? "We met with the enemy at Moore's Creek Bridge about 1 o'clock in the morning on 27th of February. An advance guard of the enemy, consisting of about 70 or 80, came up to our works and fired on our men, but they didn't do any damage. It was returned and they were drove back. Immediately after this, the main body, consisting of about 15 or 1600, made a violent attack upon us. They came to us in 2 divisions. One of them attacked the right wing of our army, the other attacked the left. They were repulsed in both. They then made a second attempt on our center, but were repulsed also. After this, they began to retreat. We did pursue them, and in the pursuit killed several and took a considerable number of prisoners. We have taken between 30 and 40 prisoners, among whom are 2 Brigadier Generals, MacDonald and McLeod, and a number of other officers. We have also taken 1,500 stand-of-arms, all their ammunition, cartridge boxes, drums, and 15 wagons loaded with provisions and other matters of consequence, which we have brought off and now are in our possession." That's pretty cool. I just like reading that stuff. Hope you enjoy that kind of stuff too. But also, it made me wonder, what happened to these main leaders of the battle afterwards? Well, you may have already guessed that I did some further research and found out what happened to the top 3 leaders on each side, the Patriots and the Loyalists. So let's start with the Patriots. So Colonel James Moore, he continued to serve in the Patriot cause. He commanded the forces in North Carolina, and he played a very significant role in subsequent military engagements until his death in 1777. Colonel Richard Caswell, his leadership at Moore's Creek Bridge elevated his prominence. He actually became the first governor of the independent state of North Carolina, and he served multiple terms between 1776 and 1780, and then again from 1785 to 1787. And last on the Patriot side is Colonel Alexander Lillington. His contributions to the Patriot victory bolstered his standing also. He continued his military service and was eventually promoted to Brigadier General in the North Carolina militia. Now, let's go to the other side, which did not fare very well. The Loyalist leaders, Brigadier General Donald MacDonald. That is just a funny name. Donald MacDonald, he was captured during the battle, and we held him as a prisoner of war. After his release in a prisoner exchange, he returned to British-held territories and said to heck with it. He never set foot on American soil again. Lieutenant Colonel Donald McLeod, he was killed during the battle while leading the charge across the bridge. So he was one of the, in fact, one letter, I don't know how accurate this is, but one letter said he took no more than 5 steps on the bridge before he was shot. But nonetheless, he did die in that battle. So that was the end of him. And the last one is Captain John Campbell. Campbell also perished in the battle, sharing the fate of many Loyalist officers who faced the fortified Patriot position. So John Campbell was killed. He was the captain. The Lieutenant Colonel, Donald McLeod, was killed. And the Brigadier General, he left. He said, enough of this. So in short, the battle was not good for the British leaders or for their war effort, obviously, either. So there you have hopefully a good description of this battle, where it took place, who was involved, what happened to him afterwards, and how important it was. We have reached the part of the show now called Lesser Known or Interesting Facts. So let's get started with those. The battle was over in minutes. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 minutes, and as we've talked about before, we have come to the conclusion with many other scholars that it was 3 minutes. Nonetheless, it was quick, and it was the shortest but most decisive battles of the entire Revolutionary War. Ever hear the saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight? I don't know if you have to say it like that, but don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, in this case, the Loyalists actually brought swords to a gunfight. The Scots expected to have hand-to-hand combat, but instead they were shredded by Patriot gunfire before they even got close. Animal fat was used as an early form of sabotage, and as I discussed earlier, the Patriots removed planks from the bridge, but also greased the beams, making it much more difficult to cross. I'm on a 42-acre farm, but if you've never tried to walk on grease or had animal fat under your foot, let's just say it makes oil seem pretty sturdy. It is really slippery stuff, and so I can see why they use that and why it worked so well during this battle. The Scottish war cry of King George and broadswords, that's what they were shouting as they charged. But as you now know, it didn't last long, and all the yelling pretty much came to a screeching halt and silenced once the Patriots started shooting them and firing off their cannons. Moores Creek was America's first major Southern victory. It crushed the Loyalist recruitment efforts in the Carolinas, and more importantly, it prevented British control of the South for almost 4 years. Governor Josiah Martin never returned to power. After the failed uprising, Martin remained in exile for the remainder of the war. He died in England, never regaining his former colony. So there you have it, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. And in the next episode of our Timeline series, I'm going to delve into the dramatic events that unfolded when the British Navy bombarded Norfolk, Virginia. This intense naval assault, which was initiated by Lord Dunmore's fleet, did lead to widespread destruction in the city, and I'm going to go into all of those details on the next episode. That's it for now, but please don't forget to let me know about only having timeline episodes on this podcast going forward, or keep the Freedom Files and other short series as part of the podcast. Again, you can email me at patriotpowerpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave a message or text me at 413-FREEDOM, or take the poll that is available on Spotify. It won't take you very long, and I really appreciate those of you who are going to let me know how you would want this podcast to continue. Also, if you have a minute, would you mind giving a review of my podcast? It only takes a few seconds, and I think it's at a 5 out of 5 stars, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is the more reviews that my podcast receives, it actually allows others to find it much easier. And I want as many people that are interested in the American Revolution to find it. So that really, really helps. If you want to go way above and beyond and help me out financially, you can become a monthly supporter or make a one-time donation. And you can do this at patriotpowerpodcast.com and then just click on Support Podcast. Links for items discussed in this show will be in the podcast description instead of my website under the show notes, which I already covered earlier. But do take a look. Some are pretty darn interesting. And there's a couple videos that aren't very long that I think will help paint a more complete picture. It's not a reenactment, but it's close to that. And I think that'll tie in everything real nicely. So until next time, let us carry forward the torch of liberty, honoring the courage of our forebears. Stay vigilant, cherish your freedom, and together, let's keep the spirit of 1776 alive.
Thanks for listening, and hope that you tune in next time with us here at the Patriot Power Podcast. Make sure that you hit subscribe so you'll get notified when our new episodes are available for you. And we hope that you check out our websites, which include our show notes, links, documents, and more at patriotpowerpodcast.com or ilovegeorgewashington.com. Until next time, hope that you and your family have a blessed week. And remember, be safe and tell a veteran thanks for their service.